Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And today I have a very important message for anybody who will be voting in the primaries on Super Tuesday in particular. What I want to talk about today is one of the candidates on the Democratic side in particular, Michael Bloomberg. This man, the people out there do not know about this man. He was mayor of New York City, and then he left public life in that capacity for many years, and now all of a sudden he's coming back out of nowhere, addressing the people of the entire United States of America, people who do not know what he did when he was mayor of New York City. And he's using tactics and techniques that are intellectually offensive to anybody who values human dignity. What I'm going to do is, I wrote out some notes here, and I want to first begin by telling you why I feel compelled to make a video like this. Lately, I have been on YouTube as often as I can be for a couple reasons. For one thing, they had the music industry trade show in January. It's called NAMM, N-A-M-M, and there was a lot of exciting gear that was released. Just really interesting, fascinating, fun, and exciting gear. All kinds of wonderful guitars, keyboards, synthesizers, just really cool stuff, right? So I'm on YouTube looking up reviews of this gear as it starts to ship and get into people's hands. I want to learn about this gear, and it's just tons of fun. I can't express how much fun it is for someone who's into music. Also, among other things, you've seen me do a couple attempts at music videos on here. Now, living in this car, having a car run 24 hours a day for half a year for 5 years in Minnesota, which is how I try to stay warm, even though my heater doesn't work, I've inhaled so many fumes that it has absolutely destroyed my vocal cords, so I will never sing again. But even so, I want to try. And I've been researching a particular song that I want to do a cover of. It is just one of those songs that you hear it and the world just blossoms into this beautiful paradise. And that's why I love music so much. Music can just bring you, it can help you see the beauty of this world, how wonderful it really can be. The song, but I don't know if I should give it away, but I will. It's a song called "It's a Miracle" by Barry Manilow from the 1970s. It's just a fun love song. And I don't know if I dare try to sing it because, again, my vocal cords are destroyed. But, forgive me, but you wouldn't believe where I've been, the cities and towns I've been in, from Boston to Denver, and every town in between. Everyone looks the same. Oh, it's just so much fun. It's just, I love this song, right? So I want to get out the guitar and the bass and drums, and I want to cover this song. So I was researching the chords and the chord progressions and things like that. So I'm on YouTube trying to have all this fun, right, with the music stuff, the NAMM, and It's a Miracle. And then all of a sudden, a few days ago, YouTube, it's like this dark, menacing cloud, like at the beginning of Independence Day when that UFO just slowly comes from the moon and it comes over the earth and casts its shadow all over the earth, and you just feel this sense of impending doom. Out of nowhere, every video I watch is preceded by a video from Michael Bloomberg. And they're all negative ads. They're just, the sky is falling. Climate change is going to kill us all. Oh my God, guns, they're going to kill us all. We've got to save science. And if you've watched my series on junk science, he's talking about saving junk science. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. Trump's the most evil person in the history of the world. We're all going to die. And I go in there to have some fun, to bring some joy into the life of someone who lives in a car. And I'm having so much fun, and Bloomberg single-handedly destroyed it. Just every single video I try to watch is preceded by some negative ad from one of the most negative and morose people I've ever seen in public life, because I've followed Bloomberg for decades. Not followed him, but, watched what he does. Believe me, I do not follow someone like that. If I followed someone like that, I would have no right to ask you to listen to a word I said. I mean, watching these videos from Bloomberg, not only does it make me leave YouTube, I just abandon it. I just abandon the whole thing. But I want to go to New York and jump off the Empire State Building. I mean, my gosh, this guy paints a picture of a world. This world's so beautiful. I mean, in my last video, I was showing you a video of how, even in this situation, this little bunny rabbit comes out. And I know when he comes out in the morning, and I'll park there, and he comes out, and I'll just watch him, his little nose. And, I mean, everyone else around's just staring at their phones. They're not paying any attention to it. And I'm just looking at this beauty. And Bloomberg comes out with all these ads just telling us, oh my God, we're all going to die. It's just horrible. Only Mike can save us. But the thing is, that's the history of Michael Bloomberg. And I've got to tell people about it. Because the people of the United States have not watched this guy the way I have. Now, the only reason I've watched him is because he is one of the most prominent leaders of the most wealthy and powerful hate group in the world, the anti-smoking industry. Michael Bloomberg, when he smoked, it was okay if everyone else smoked. It was fine. Once he quit smoking, every other person on the face of the earth had to stop smoking as well, or else. Or else. You see, because he's Michael Bloomberg. He's Michael Bloomberg. I'm Paul B. If I decide to do something, I don't feel any compulsion to make everyone else on the face of the earth do it. It doesn't even enter my head. I don't have a megalomaniac tendency. But if you're a megalomaniac, then when you do something or you stop doing something, all of a sudden everyone else must do it as well. Because I'm me. I'm me. They're just the ignorant hordes. They're just the masses. Who cares? They have to stop too. So I've watched Bloomberg for years because I've studied the anti-smoking movement turned industry as it turned into the most wealthy and powerful industry, the most evil industry on the face of the earth. I've made many videos. If you watch my junk science series, you'll see about it. So that's how I know about Bloomberg. That's the only reason I know. I mean, I've been to New York City one time, and I will never go back. I will never go back. It was, and in large part because of what he did to that city. I mean, he's the first Democratic candidate here to just pollute our environment with all of this negativity. Negative ad, negative ad, negative ad, negative ad, negative ad. We're all going to die. We're all going to die. I mean, this guy just makes me want to die. I live in a car and I maintain more joy and happiness and enthusiasm than the people around me who are staring at their phones all the day in their nice homes and their nice cars. And Michael Bloomberg, some guy who I haven't met and never will, and he's off, I don't know, some penthouse somewhere. This guy makes me want to die. And the problem is, if someone like that becomes the most powerful man on the face of the earth, there's a good chance that that's what's going to happen to a lot of people. And I need to tell you why. Because this is what he's always done. This is what Bloomberg has always done. Now, without getting in too much into the anti-smoking thing, because I've covered it in my junk science videos here. Go watch those if you want to learn about anti-smoking and their lies and the way that they've developed the most effective and efficient playbook for manipulating people, for leading the masses into a direction that they want people to go. And this playbook has been adopted by all these others, climate change. Not just in junk science, but anywhere. It can also be applied to a political campaign. And that's exactly what he's doing. But I have to give a little bit of history. Anti-smoking went nowhere for 450 years. It was considered the lunatic fringe, and it should be. That's exactly what it should be. What changed? What suddenly changed in the mid-20th century to make anti-smoking suddenly take off, and within one generation it becomes the most wealthy and powerful and profitable industry on the face of the earth? How does that happen? It happens because they looked around for what works so that they could adopt it. And what worked in the mid-20th century? What worked? Can you think of what worked? In Germany, the Jews were considered totally normal citizens. They were valued citizens. They were national heroes. They contributed so much to the economy and the productivity. They made Germany the most civilized and modern nation in Europe, perhaps in the world at that time. And yet, within a decade or so, everything turned around completely to the point where the Jews were demonized, to the point where, at least if everyone didn't just outright hate them at that point, they would sit back and do nothing while the trains came and picked up the Jews and took them all away to the death camps and the crematoria. 1 decade is all it took to transform people from being perfectly normal. Just like smokers, as I observed in the late 80s and early 90s, in 1 decade, they went from being perfectly normal members of society who coexisted perfectly fine with non-smokers, and together as a cohesive unit who respected each other and got along together, they took us from the Stone Age to the Space Age over the last 500 years. And then in 10 years, the anti-smoking industry turned it around to where everyone hated and despised smokers in the tobacco industry. And they persecute them, they steal their money, trillions of dollars stolen in taxes from smokers. Where did they get that idea from? Where did they get that idea from? There is no other example. And the timing tells you the mid-20th century is when this happened. They got it from Mein Kampf. They got it from Hitler's playbook, how to manipulate the masses using propaganda and junk science. Hitler himself was a virulent anti-smoker. And if he didn't need all those smokers, see, that's the problem with it's always been the problem with anti-smokers. There's so many smokers in the world, they need them. Bloomberg needs smokers to become president. He needs their vote. That's why he hasn't said a word about what he's going to do to smokers when he becomes president. Just like when he ran for mayor of New York, he didn't say a word about it. Nothing. And then once he's elected, all of a sudden, he imposes a smoking ban on, 12, 15 million equal human beings out of the clear blue sky. Never said a word about it. That's called exploitation. It's like, I want these smokers' votes. Even though I hate them and I despise them and I plan to persecute them, I want their votes. So I'm not even going to tell them what I'm going to do to them until I become mayor, until I have the power. That's the kind of person Michael Bloomberg is. It's documented. If you think I'm lying, go do some research. Go do some research. Because right now, all you're getting is Negative Nancy's ads all over YouTube. This guy sees everything as a threat. Smokers are a threat. Guns are a threat. Climate change is a threat. Everything's a threat. Everything's a threat. A guy who lives in a car who is really under threat of my very survival. I still find the beauty and the fun things in this world. That song, the rabbit, so much else. But this guy with his billions of dollars, oh my God, we're all going to die. There's something wrong with this guy. If I can find the joy and the hope and the happiness in this world, in this situation, why can't a billionaire do it? And he wants to become president of the United States, the person who will influence the next generation of Americans. Okay, great. Before you vote for this man, before you vote for him on Super Tuesday, before you give this guy even a prayer of a chance of becoming president, please at least listen to what I have to say here. The system that Hitler came up with to create this 180-degree turn against the Jews, he created theory. He adopted a lot of other theories, Jacques Ellul and the crowd, manipulative behavior. That's why Goebbels, the propaganda minister, was such a prominent part of his administration, probably the most prominent part of his administration. Propaganda was everything, using rhetoric and manipulative language, images, words, to manipulate people's thoughts and beliefs and attitudes without ever proving anything, which coincidentally is exactly how junk science operates. Watch my junk science series. Hitler created this And he documents it. He puts it in Mein Kampf even before he implemented it. He said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And throughout, there's nothing but contempt for the masses, the great masses of ignorant hordes is what he called them. But he needed those masses of ignorant hordes to get done what he wanted to get done, to take power. So even Hitler, who published what he's going to do, he published his contempt for the average person, and yet the average person put him in power. Are we going to repeat something like that? Anti-smoking took Hitler's playbook. He was a virulent anti-smoker. Once he stopped smoking, everyone else had to stop. Those death camps and crematoria were going to be used for other people when the war was over, when the Jews were gone. Do you think he built, 42,000 camps? Do you think he built those just to get rid of 6-8 million Jews, and then they're just going to shut them all down, turn them into Starbucks? Do you think that's what Hitler planned? He had other people intended to go to those places later. After the war, when he no longer needed all those smokers to fight and die for him personally, guess who was going to be among the many people who were going to be headed for those camps? He hated smokers, but only after he stopped smoking. When he smoked, it was fine if everyone smoked. When he stopped, everyone else must stop smoking. Look up Hitler as an anti-smoker, something that people do not know. The anti-smokers adopted his playbook after World War II. It takes a while to kick something like that into gear, and they had to get financing. They finally got the financing from Big Pharmacy, who wanted to steal all of the money that Big Tobacco, well, there is no Big Tobacco, but that the tobacco industry had. They wanted to steal that wealth. So they combined together, they implemented this playbook, adopted for the kind of junk science that Hitler did, adopted it for an American audience, and again, within 10 years, smokers went from being just ordinary, average people, whatever, you smoke, okay, whatever, I don't, let's go get something done together as a team. In 10 years, it's like, oh my God, you smoke, get away from me, get away from my kids, get away from my kids. And all of a sudden there's this hatred and this desire to persecute smokers and destroy them, steal their money, change them from something that they don't want to be, or that they want to be, into something that they don't want to be. Make them feel guilt and shame and just nothing but, again, just nothing but negativity. That's what anti-smokers' product is. The anti-smoking industry's product is hatred and fear and terror, discord, division. That's what they sell. That is their product. And it's all done through propaganda. So, that's that part. And I want to remember, in World War II, when those trains came to pick up Jews, there were very, very, very few of those Jews who resisted getting on those trains, being packed like sardines onto these cattle cars. Very few tried to escape, and if they did, they got shot. They were told these trains were taking them just to labor camps. They were going to build, munitions and stuff for the Nazis. They didn't resist getting on those trains, but guess what? There were even 4 people who escaped from Auschwitz. There were people out there warning the Jews, whatever you do, do not get on those trains. Do not get on those trains. Don't do it. They're murdering people in mass. It's mass murder. They're gassing them and then they're burning their bodies. Mass graves everywhere. And yet, very, 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 very few Jews resisted getting on those trains. They didn't listen to the people telling the truth. They did listen to the people telling the big lies, the people who controlled the mass media, what you might call German fake news. Who is Michael Bloomberg? Where did he get his billions of dollars? He got it from forming Bloomberg Business News. Media. Someone who broadcasts. It's a one-to-many relationship. One person broadcasts, many people hear it, and they can't challenge in real time what they're being told. So you can tell them lies. How did he make his money? He made his money by basically becoming an intelligence agency for the megalomaniacs on Wall Street and the globalists, the people who want to rule this world, who want a one world government where they, of course, are in charge, not you. They tell you what to do, and you will do it, or else. He made his billions of dollars with that, with a news agency that was directed precisely toward the very people who want to take over everything, who want to control everybody, who want to be in charge, and who don't want you to have any say in anything. You will just like the smokers can go to war and fight and die to make sure that Hitler is protected, that's what the masses can do for these globalists and these Wall Street people, so that they can enjoy lives of luxury. Bloomberg made it possible for them. Bloomberg News is an intelligence agency for that group, that tiny itty-bitty subset of people out of what might be 10 billion people in the world today. That's how he made his money. And that should tell you something about who he is. During the Super Bowl, Bloomberg got busted a bit. He put up one of his ads where he, as they so often do, as the anti-smokers have always done, always exploiting children, just disgusting. They look at children, they talk about saving children, save the children, and all they do is exploit children. They teach the kids at school, oh, do your parents smoke? They're murdering you. They tell kids that their parents are murdering them. What do you think happens when those kids go back home and they're trying to have a family unit? Destroys the family. Remember, their product is division, discord, destruction. That is what they do. That is what anti-smokers have always done. But he comes out with this anti-gun ad, and see, here's one of the tactics of propaganda. If you're trying to manipulate people, there's a lot of tactics. One of them is juxtaposition. So he talks about, he puts these parents on there who are telling this sad story about how their child, and it was their child because they gave birth to it, but the person was an adult when they were shot. See, they were an adult. But then they talk about children in the ad. So you in your mind, they said it's their child, which is accurate semantically, even though the person was actually an adult. And then Bloomberg's ad uses the phrase children. So you put two and two together and you picture in your mind some little 5-year-old kid, someone goes up and shoots him in the head. That's not what happened. But that's called manipulation. That's what these people do. Now, he got busted a bit for it, but when you have nothing but fake news in this country, news that is run by Wall Street and these globalists, how are you going to really know about that? That's disgusting, but it's another example. It shows you that since he was mayor, all those years he disappeared, and now he's back, he's doing the same thing he did before, and that should scare the crap out of everybody. He's straight to exploiting children. Children exist for Michael Bloomberg. That's why they exist. You know, I've been homeless. I've been living in this car for 5 years. 5 years I've been living in this car. I've been fighting battles. I've been making these videos for about 3 of those years. I work hard at my job, and my reward is being in this car. But through it all, I have studied what is going on with homelessness. I've studied social services. I've studied the government. In Minnesota here, you've got a liberal government that tries its best to model itself after California because they saw them on the TV in Hollywood. They're not the greatest thinkers here in the Minnesota legislature, which is what produced things like Amy Klobuchar, by the way, running for president as well. I have studied homelessness inside out and backwards. I understand the problem. And one thing I understand is why in liberal cities like San Francisco, you've got these tent cities of homeless people who are living existences that are just unimaginable in the United States of America, and they don't do anything about it. The same thing's happening in Minnesota. It's just that Minnesota operates as a cult. You'll see in my other videos. They make sure nobody sees it. It's spread out, and they just don't have the population anyway to where you're going to have that kind of masses of homeless people in one spot. But they do have tent cities around here, and they get busted up. They're not going to let the people of Minnesota know that there's 10,000 homeless people. They're not going to let them know that people suffer the way that I suffer. Even worse, I have a car at least. It doesn't have any heater. even though, 2 days ago it was minus 15 degrees with a minus 35 degree wind chill, and I'm in a car with no heater. Those people are outside. They do nothing about it. I know about homelessness. 5 years I've been in here, 5 years I've been studying it. Yet, guess what? If Michael Bloomberg suddenly gave me every penny he has, the same amount of money as Michael Bloomberg, the last thing in the world I would ever do with it, if I wanted to address the homeless problem or any issue, is run for president of the United States. I would never do it, because that's not where you get this problem fixed. I understand the problem. The problem has to be addressed by other means. The only reason I would use that money to run for president is if I was a megalomaniac and I wanted to control everything. And I wouldn't even think of that. It wouldn't even enter my mind to try to do that, because I got work to do. I've got millions of homeless people to save. I've got countless millions of children who are being exploited, particularly by all these liberals. They need to get their childhoods back. They need to get their lives back. They need to get their minds back. We've got people out there saying smoking kills, when it doesn't. If you don't believe me, go smoke a cigarette. And when you're done smoking the cigarette, take note of the fact that you're still alive. You see, cancer kills, and there may or may not be some relationship between smoking and related to cancer. There may or may not be, but it doesn't matter, does it? Cancer is what kills. And yet, what do anti-smokers do? They come right out and say, anti-smoking leaders have come right out and said, we need to stop trying to cure cancer. They have said it with words, with their mouths. But when you're staring at your phone, you don't know that, do you? What do they say we should do instead? They say we should focus on prevention. What is prevention to them? Persecuting smokers, stealing their money, going after and persecuting the tobacco industry. And yet they say, we're trying to save the children, save the children, save the children. All those people dying of cancer, all of our national resources for 30 years now have been focused on persecuting and destroying smokers in the tobacco industry. All of those resources could have gone instead into curing cancer, so that everybody who gets cancer no longer has to die and suffer from that problem. We're not even trying to do it, and it's because of anti-smokers, and yet you probably think those are the benefactors of society. Anti-smokers, of which one of the greatest leaders is Michael Bloomberg. He gave more than $100 million of his own money to that industry, which is a 500-year-old hate group. A group that comes out and says we need to stop even looking for a cure for cancer and focus essentially on persecuting smokers instead. See, Bloomberg really needs smokers, because there's an awful lot of them in America still. He needs their vote badly. So he's not going to talk about this stuff until he has the power and no one can stop him anymore. That's why I'm talking about it right now. Hi, I'm so sorry to interrupt with this really dark video here, but I was editing this video overnight in this very cold night here, and I realized I left out one of my most important points in this video. So I have to insert this. This concerns two things in particular: human health and the law of supply and demand. Okay, the law of supply and demand is fundamental to economics. It is to economics what the laws of gravity that Isaac Newton described are to physics. Okay, it's the fundamental law of economics. So if you're studying economics or you're trying to improve the economy, you have to understand how the law of supply and demand works. And if you look at my video, 50 Existential Threats to the United States of America, you'll notice that one of them is our inability to understand the law of supply and demand, because it isn't taught in schools anymore, and I think that's deliberate, but that's another story. Okay, students are not taught the law of supply and demand, and people live in denial of it. What happens is people keep violating the law of supply and demand. Now, if you want to violate the law of gravity, then next time you're on an airplane, open up the door and take a step outside for some fresh air and see how that goes for you. You can't violate natural laws, folks. And you can't violate the fundamental law of economics. Okay, there's consequences when you do that. What I'm going to demonstrate here in the next few minutes is that Michael Bloomberg blatantly violated the law of supply and demand, and that it has had absolutely catastrophic consequences for the entire nation, let alone New York City. What I'm getting at is this. Back in the 80s, when I was growing up in the 80s, you could smoke anywhere. You could smoke in restaurants, you could smoke in bars. Teachers would smoke in the classroom. You could smoke in hospitals. You could smoke anywhere, right? And forget your prejudices for just a moment, please, because that's something that you've been indoctrinated with. Forget it. It's not about that. The point is, back then, you could smoke anywhere. You could smoke on airplanes, okay? Now, the first ones who implemented a smoking ban were the airlines. And it makes sense, right? Because you're in an enclosed space that you can't leave. You don't have the freedom to leave because it's in flight. And that makes sense to prohibit smoking in an environment like that. The whole problem with smoking bans in a bar or a restaurant is that nobody is sticking a gun to somebody's head and forcing you to go to that bar or to that restaurant. You have all the free choice in the world to go somewhere else if you don't like it. Okay, now with a smoking ban, it's another story, because now the government's putting a gun to smokers' heads and saying, you cannot do this. See, that's where the violence comes in. That's where the loaded gun comes in. Even though Michael Bloomberg says he's against guns, his smoking ban ultimately is enforced at the end of a gun. See, anti-smokers are violent. Smokers were just smoking. And if you didn't like it, go to somewhere else. You don't have to be there. No one ever forced you at gunpoint to be there. But on an airplane, it's another story. You don't have a choice once you're in flight. So it makes sense to prohibit smoking on an airplane. That makes perfect sense. But here's the thing. At the time, due to the social mores of the time, it was perfectly normal and natural to smoke on airplanes. The ones who wanted to ban smoking on planes more than anybody were the airlines themselves. And here's where it gets really interesting. You see, the reason they wanted to ban it wasn't because people were uncomfortable with the smoking. I mean, yes, they were uncomfortable, but the fact is, people were used to it. Again, let your prejudices go. This was a different time. If you grow up in that environment, you're just used to it, and it isn't that big of a deal. People were able to get along with each other much better back then than they are today. They weren't whining and moaning about everything that bothered them. You just dealt with it and went about your life. But back then, the problem was, if someone lit up a cigarette in the back of an airplane, within a couple of minutes, it's going to waft forward, and somebody at the front of the plane is going to smell it. Now, here's the thing. The airlines didn't really care if somebody smelled the smoke. That happened all over society. The problem was that if somebody up front thinks about what's going on, and they smell the smoke, and they look back and they see someone at the back of the plane smoking, it's going to register in their mind, hey, you know what? I can smell his smoke coming up here. Therefore, anything else that he's exhaling, like a virus or a disease or anybody else sitting between me and him, that's also in our air. See, the problem with smoke there was that it alerted people to the fact that the air filtration and the air quality on these airplanes was horrific. It was a death trap. And that's why everybody to this day, actually, because they didn't fix the problem, to this day, if you go on an airplane, there's a very good chance you're going to get sick, right? Happens all the time with business travelers. The reason is because the airlines wanted to ban smoking because their only other option was to spend a whole lot of money improving the air quality on their planes. They had to redo their whole air filtration systems, and in fact, they had to invent systems that were much better than what existed at the time. The law of supply and demand. You see, smoking on a plane created a demand for extraordinarily better air filtration than what existed at the time. Smoking in restaurants, the same thing. So what was happening was in the 80s, there were companies that were trying to develop the next generation of air filtration. And these things were going to be so good that you could sit in a restaurant, you could sit at a table, nobody's smoking, and the table next to you, everybody's smoking, and you can barely even tell that it's happening, if you can tell at all. That's how good the air filtration was going to be. Now, this could benefit people not just in an environment with cigarette smoke. What about hospitals? If you want to catch a disease, if you want to get sick, the best way to do it is just go visit a hospital or visit a doctor's office. odds are you're going to get sick if you do that, right? Because that's where everybody with all these contagious diseases goes. What if you had these kind of air filtration systems in hospitals and doctors' offices? So many people die in hospitals because they went to the hospital. These air filtration systems would have gone a long way toward ending that. All that would be left really at that point is all the malpractice, right, to kill people off. But this air filtration system, what about cruise ships? You could be on cruise ships and not be spreading all these diseases. What about public buildings? In a courtroom, which often has a lot of congested people. The Department of Motor Vehicles, very congested, long lines. What if they had this kind of air filtration in there? What about our desire to go to Mars? It takes a year to go to Mars and a year to come back. For those astronauts to be safe and healthy, among other things, they need the far better air filtration and air quality than we are capable of today. Far better. But the thing is, we would have had that today if they had not imposed the smoking bans, because all these companies were just starting to try to develop that very technology. And the technology that was applied due to the law of supply and demand for smoking would have benefited everybody in all other areas of society. Hospitals, public buildings, cruise ships, space station, trips to Mars, buses, homes, our homes. And the thing is, the real causes of cancer are found in our air. Not smoke, but in our air, the air we breathe, in the food we eat, in the water we drink. It's pollution. That's the big cause of this. It isn't smoking. You can tell that by the simple fact that back then almost everybody smoked, now almost nobody smokes, and yet cancer's a worse problem than ever before. The real problem is in our air. If people like Michael Bloomberg had not imposed these smoking bans, which he did as soon as he got into office, bam, imposed a smoking ban on millions and millions and millions of New Yorkers and all of the millions of tourists who would go to New York City. He imposed that ultimately at the end of a gun, because anti-smokers are violent, right? Smokers aren't. Smokers are just smoking. They're not putting a gun to your head and saying, you stay here and breathe my smoke. They're saying, well, you're free to stay if you like. I'd love to share your company, but if you don't like the smoke, you're welcome to leave. That's called freedom. That's what happens in a free country. Michael Bloomberg takes the other route. Even though he's anti-gun, he wants the government's gun pointed at smokers, right? If he had not imposed that smoking ban, and if all these other anti-smoking leaders had not imposed these smoking bans, in the last 30 years, the air filtration we would have developed, we would be breathing so much better air. People who are on an airplane right now where they find out that one person on the plane has coronavirus, the odds of everyone else getting coronavirus from that are slim to none with that kind of filtration. But instead, we have the same filtration we had 30 years ago, essentially. So now we have to worry about everybody on that plane getting coronavirus and then getting off the plane and spreading it all over the country. That's how a pandemic happens. You would think that someone like the CDC would find that interesting, right? Center for Disease Control. But no, they don't understand the law of supply and demand. So they pushed for smoking bans instead. Michael Bloomberg pushed for smoking bans. The law of supply and demand says if you leave people alone, leave them to do what comes natural to them, then if you let them smoke, then the non-smokers not liking it is going to inspire better air filtration and better air quality so that smokers and non-smokers can coexist peacefully. And the benefits from that are going to help stop pandemic diseases. They're going to stop people from dying when they go to the hospital for simple problems. They've got a broken toe and instead they catch some deadly disease in the hospital. I hope you understand what I'm saying here. It's these anti-smokers who impose the smoking ban who have caused so much death and destruction in this country. And I left that point out of the original video, and I'm freezing here. I'm sorry, folks, but I had to insert this video to let you know about that. Do you want somebody who claims to have made his fortune by being an intelligence service for Wall Street, for busyness people, and the guy doesn't even understand the fundamentals of the law of supply and demand, something that a small child in a quality education system would understand? Is that who you want in the White House, affecting the entire United States economy? I urge you to think very, very carefully about that. I now return you to my previous video. Bloomberg's ads say that he's going to protect science. There's a war on science. Remember, the sky is falling, we're all going to die. You know, another negative Nancy. There's no war on science. There's a war on junk science, and there should be a war on junk science. If we're attacked by terrorists, we should fight and declare war against them to stop them, to protect ourselves, to protect our children, to protect our futures, to protect our lives. Yes, there's a war on junk science. There should be. Because it's junk science. They're lying. And they're using science as a political tool to achieve their own personal agendas. Yes, we should be fighting against that. I don't know anybody who's fighting against junk science who is against science. They are the most pro-science people in the world. That's why they're fighting against the corruption of science. But not Bloomberg. He says, I want to protect science. But then you look at what he calls science, anti-smoking, climate change, all this stuff, and all of a sudden you find, oh, hey, that's all junk science. He wants to protect junk science. In my summary video on junk science, I list out my 50 greatest existential threats to the United States of America, and I show how junk science underlies almost every single one of them. These are the worst, most threatening existential threats to the continuation of the United States of America as a free and prosperous and safe nation for all of its citizens. And junk science underlies almost every single one of them. And he wants to protect junk science. Thanks to the anti-smokers taking over what they call health, which again is just propaganda. It has nothing to do with health, right? Are people healthier? Are they really healthier? Or are they bigger and more unhealthy than they've ever been before? I mean, all these people have quit smoking. You used to have, in some places, you had 75% of the population smoked. Now you've got almost nothing. What, 15% of the population smokes? And yet cancer is a worse problem than it's ever been before. All these things they attribute to smoking are worse problems than they've ever been before. It doesn't take a lot of thinking to figure out that maybe they were lying. Maybe they were completely, totally, utterly lying about the problem that smoking causes. Because now that really almost nobody's smoking, the problems are worse than they've ever been before. All right? One of the things the anti-smokers did, and this is how they became so wealthy. In one of my other videos, I show how the amount of money that they're stealing at gunpoint, using the government as their henchmen, they're stealing from smokers through these taxes. Smokers are now paying 10 times, at least 10 times as much as a pack of cigarettes would cost if it were in a free market. A pack of cigarettes would cost maybe $1.50, $2, maybe a little bit more, but about that amount if it were a free market without interference from anti-smokers and government. Instead, they're paying $10, $13, $17 a pack for cigarettes. Where's all that money going to? It's going to this hate group. Trillions of dollars. There is not an economy, an empire, an industry anywhere on the face of the earth in all of history that has ever even approached the amount of money that these people are stealing. By my calculations, and they were the low end, over 50 years, $230 trillion these people are stealing from smokers. If you're a smoker and Bloomberg's not telling you what he really thinks about you, what he's going to do to you later, what do you think's going to happen to the price of cigarettes after that? If you're losing money now where you can't pay for health care and you have to go out and get insurance because all your money's being stolen by anti-smokers, or if you want to send your kids to school but you can't afford it because all your money is stolen by anti-smokers, so you have to go out and get a student loan and put this ball and chain around your child's leg before they even start their productive lives, you might want to think about what's going to happen to you when this man takes office. Because when he ran for mayor of New York, he didn't say a word about it until he had the power. And then the persecution began. If you're a smoker and he's begging for your vote, you better think about that. Because what he's not telling you is the important part. It's called a lie of omission. And that is one of the most evil forms of propaganda I have ever encountered. And he's doing it again. A carbon copy of what he did running for mayor of New York. Any smoker out there who votes for Michael Bloomberg, it's like a Jew voting for Adolf Hitler. And I'm not trying to just invoke Hitler and invoke the Nazi Party. The problem is the analogy is perfect. Hitler persecuted Jews. A Jew voting for him is the same as if this person persecutes this group and this group votes for him. It doesn't matter whether it's Jews or smokers or whatever. The point is, when you vote for someone who persecutes you and your particular class of citizens, that's insane. The only way you would do it is if someone were manipulating you, lying to you, not telling you the whole truth about what this person plans to do to you once you provide them with what they need, your vote. Remember that on Super Tuesday. Please research the reality of Michael Bloomberg and Klobuchar and all these other people. Look at what they've done. Look at San Francisco. Look at the body count in San Francisco. Come to Minnesota and hunt around and you'll see the same kind of bodies laying around. They're just more scattered. I wish you all well. We're in this together. We're all American citizens. I'm trying to make my contribution here. I hope it helps give you food for thought. And I hope you'll make a wise decision on Super Tuesday. For all of our sakes. For your kids' sakes. For our futures. Thank you so much for watching.